There we are. Just setting up my screen. Checking my totals before we get started. We're at 3,668 subs. Hey, Kathy Doherty, my friend. Sandra Cosby, Rita Close, Jewel Giacana. Hey, Kathy X50. Thank you for the like. I haven't even started yet. Somebody gave me a like. Appreciate that. It helps the algorithm to hit the like button, to subscribe, to hit those red hearts on the screen, to chat. And you know what? I'm not even going to set the goal for today. I'm just going to let it roll and see what happens. Hi, April and the posse. The PI posse. The Pips. Suzanne, Hobble One. Oh, wow. We've got two Kathys in here already, the usuals. I didn't have time to get the perfect green screen, but that is a background of, that's a picture taken from Horn Island. Kathy just ate dinner. I've hardly eaten anything today. I'm going to eat during the Yankees game, the Yankee-Dodger game, which is on in less than an hour. Hype brings the video up, like people will go see it. It helps the video. Hyping helps, and it's free. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a little blurred, but most of the pictures are horizontal, and then they don't fit with the vertical. So, and I can't change it afterwards because it's not like changing the thumbnail, where I can change the thumbnail anytime I want. Suzanne sent the star first jewel of the day. We'll see how many people come in because everybody wants to talk about Nancy. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. And my friend DeJuice, Troy, he said I should. But I didn't want to make the video right away because some of his trolls might, you know, accuse me of ripping off somebody else's content. What a joke. We all do YouTube our own way. And he's encouraging me. He's like, no, you should, you should. Yes, I love Mexican people. It's my favorite food. Mexican food. And everybody here is welcome, but no knuckleheads, no politics, no religion, no arguing within the chat. Just in case you're new here, those are the rules. Kathy Doherty sent the floating heart. Wow, we haven't even started. This is an interesting one, and this is very controversial, what we're going to talk about today. And I feel like I have the right to talk about it because I know exactly where this story happened that we're getting ready to talk about. This is not a good one. So many of my viewers have been asking me to talk about this. Hey, Jane Rice. Yeah, it's going to be hard on a Friday afternoon to get people to come in at this time of the day, especially with the Dodgers and the Yankees getting ready to play. But let me just get started. I'm April Davis PI, and I am a licensed PI in Los Angeles, California, mostly retired. I have been reporting mostly on my lives on the Nancy Guthrie case, day number 167, but I have felt like kind of obligated to my audience to talk about this one, the Nolan Wells case. Yeah, Nolan Wells. This is a really sad story. This is the death of a young black male, age 18, died after an excursion out to Horn Island, which is in Jackson County, Mississippi. It's not like Catalina Island with mountains and hotels and restaurants. It's just like, you know, it's not even Gilligan's Island. It's just this little island that's 10 miles off the coast of Mississippi. I was almost there. In fact, I was on a boat as a child with a family, another family from California like myself. That's what we had in common, and that's why we became besties. And before they moved to New Jersey, they had a boat that they would often take to either Mobile Bay or the Gulf of Mississippi. Hey, sassy granny, on a bus to Toronto, how cool. So anyway, we were going to head out to Horn Island one day, and I was terrified. And I'm telling you, from that I forget what they call it, the bay, it's the Gulf of Mexico, but there's an area between the port at like Pascagoula until Horn Island, and that's about a 10-mile stretch of ocean. And when you're in that little teeny boat, the island is not even visible. So you have to have good navigation or you'd never make it out there. Now today, I'm sure there's all kinds of like GPS devices. We didn't have any of that back in the day. And the guy that was driving the boat, who was no longer with us, Leo, rest in peace, he got a weather report that there were some squalls that were pretty tall. And they had a problem going out there once before where they didn't think they were going to make it back. It was really scary. And he decided that particular day, like, maybe we should make a U-turn. And we'll just, like, go boating and fishing in the little bayou there that was near the shipyard where my dad worked for about 12 years in southern Mississippi in Pascagoula. Mississippi Sound, you got it, Candy Rose. That's it. It's been a while. I was a child when we lived in Alabama and my dad worked in Mississippi. But we went to the little bayou where they had that little, alien abduction situation involving two guys that worked at my dad's company. That's another story. I had some videos on that, but when my YouTube channel got demonetized more than a year ago, I deleted some of those videos. Candy lives in Pascagoula. Thank you, Mississippi Sound. My dad worked there for 12, 13 years when I was a kid. And we didn't live in Mississippi. We looked, but my mom, the only house she could find that she liked was right across from the Gulf of Mississippi, or Mississippi Sound. And, literally the Gulf of Mexico was across the street. And my dad said, don't even get out of the car. And he started talking to the realtor about the possibility of a hurricane. And then he said, well, you should go over to Mobile, Alabama. And even though we were white folks, they told us to live in a segregated neighborhood. And not segregated black versus white, but segregated Yankees versus Southerners. So we were just so hot and tired, and I was getting sick from the humidity. They had to find me a doctor before we even moved into our house there because the weather was just like, ugh. And I'd never been sick a day in my life until the week we moved there. And I just remember the heat and the bugs and the humidity. It was not for me. Born in Biloxi at Keeler Air Force Base. Lori, I know where that is. Keesler. Okay. Oh my God. It's funny, I said Keeler because our next door neighbors in Mobile, their names were the Keelers. But there is it Keesler or Kessler? Keesler Air Force Base? I know exactly where it is. So now, apparently the area is a lot built up now, and there's even casinos. Like, it sounds fun now. Even New Orleans is more built up than when we lived there. But we had to go live in Alpine Hills. Not because we were white, but because we were Yankees. And we had neighbors from Pennsylvania, New York. Of course, we had our group from Connecticut and California. Two of my friends in the junior high school there were from St. Louis, but the kid was born in New Orleans. In fact, she used to be one of my mods here. Another one was from Buffalo, New York. There was the Burks and the Wolves from New York. There was the Rennies from Connecticut. There was the Woods and the Schlecks and the Timmermeyers and us. There was a family across the street from Minnesota, another family up the street that was their best friends from Michigan. Like, our neighbors were from Michigan, our second neighbors. And there were Southerners in the neighborhood too, but they were like, you'll do better in Yankee land. And during that time that we lived there, before we talk about this Nolan Wells, my dad called down a family from Connecticut who I think we had gone on the job to California with, but I'm not sure because I was just a baby. And they were a black family. And the father hesitated to accept. My dad convinced him that everything would be fine. They moved in, and shortly after moving in, in Mississippi because they wanted to be closer to work. They didn't want to have to drive the hour that my dad and our friends drove each way. The KKK burned a cross in their front lawn and their house burned down. And I've never forgotten that. My dad probably had to live with that for the rest of his life because he felt guilty about that. Hopefully things have changed. There's another friend I grew up with who was my Bay Area neighbor. Then they went back to Connecticut while we went to Los Angeles. Then we lived together for a while in Mobile until they got their house. That girl now lives in Florida. Her sister still lives in the original house that everybody moved into in the late 60s in Mobile. Most of the people moved in 69 to early 70s. And apparently her sister now has, black friends because she's the only white person left. And I'm proud to say that our family, we were friends with a black family in Mobile, and the lady was a really well-known lawyer and judge. She was a very famous black person in Mobile, Alabama, and they moved to our white neighborhood so they could live across the street so her daughter, who was best friends with my sister, could be close to each other. And I do remember, although we were so thrilled that our friends were coming, especially my sister, because their daughter was her best friend. My parents were worried that there might be another Mississippi situation, and they just prayed and prayed and prayed like nothing bad would happen. And then they moved in, and sadly the husband got cancer and died. But as far as I know, even though she would be probably in her 80s now, the mom still lives in that neighborhood. So, I feel like I can talk about this because I lived in the Deep South, and I'm a white person. I remember being in a private school where everything was segregated. Then in the 8th grade, I got to go to public school, and I was so excited because I was going to ride the school bus, and I was going to go into, it was a lower income black poor neighborhood, and there would be white kids and black kids and teachers at the school. And I was thrilled about that because I didn't like being in school with the white rich kids that were all Southerners, and they would get very upset with me when I didn't understand the word kin, and they would say, "Who's your kin?" And I'd be like, "Excuse me? Who's your kin?" And when they found out that, I wasn't cousins with everybody in the class and that we were not even from there, I was immediately, an outsider. I had a bullseye on my back. I was thrilled to death to go to the mixed race school where I would not have a target on my back. And I'm telling the story from the perspective of a white person. I can't walk into a black man's or black woman's shoes. So we're not going to talk about this story and say that this is a race thing, but obviously that's why the parents are represented by the attorney they are represented from, because you do have a young black male, 18-year-old black male, who went out on a boating trip on July 4th to Horn Island, Mississippi, which is technically Jackson County, even though it's in Mississippi Sound. And thank you for the person from Pascagoula who let me know that. There's a motto among some Southern blacks, Southern before black. Okay. Somebody's talking about vertigo. I have vertigo, and it's horrible. What did I miss? I saw the Born in Mississippi part. That's awesome. What did I miss? I don't do boats either. I suffer from horrible motion sickness. Yeah, I would never go out on that. I would never want to go with them. And my best friend Stephanie would beg, like, "Please come. It's going to be fun." And my mom, my dad couldn't even buy us a boat, at least not for going out onto the Gulf, because my mom was like, "No way." Like, we weren't even allowed to go on a cruise because of her motion sickness. Kathy Doherty says, Tennessee is still like this. Well, my friend Lisa, who I have known since I was 15 months old. In fact, you might recognize her name because if you look at my links and you see my cancer GoFundMe, she is the woman who insisted on setting that up. And she's lived in Sarasota for most of her adult life, since she left high school and went to art school. And She does occasionally, she's had to go back because of her mother's death and estate issues to Mobile, but she won't even go there anymore for a reunion for her high school, which was in our neighborhood, because she gets very, very upset, like almost cries, and says, that she always had a target on her back because, she wasn't from there either, and that things have never changed, and everybody's the same. But you know what? Some of the friends that I met there are still my friends today. Oh, Lori Smith, I didn't see that. Thank you. First super chat of the day. I didn't know you were born in Mississippi. That's pretty cool. My sister was born actually in Mobile, Alabama. She is the only person in our entire family that is not from either Illinois, or I'm a Rhode Islander myself, but mostly a California girl, as you guys know. She didn't have the big problems that I had. She also started in the private school from nursery school on up. Yeah, now they call it pre-K, but back in those days it was nursery school. My sister was in a totally different boat because she was born in downtown Mobile, Alabama. Thank you for sending the happy poop. Alcatraz boating accident, I know. But today we're going to talk about Nolan Wells. And like I said, 18-year-old black male out with 3 white boys. They all went out there together for July 4th, and the white boys came back, and the black male did not come back. And nobody is able to really say why this black man, he was just getting ready to start college. In fact, he was a football player from high school, really like well-known football player in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, which I'm very familiar with. I've driven through there multiple times, either on the way to Biloxi or New Orleans, and I don't remember it much now. I was a little bit more familiar with Pascagoula because sometimes I had to go down to the events there and climb aboard the warships and sit at the helm when I was a little kid with the Navy and say, "Look, Daddy, I'm driving the ship." So that's why I'm familiar there with that area, because of my dad's defense work with the Navy. However, even though it's 2026, we have a black male with 3 white boys, and one of the white boys' mother is a judge, okay, in Jackson County, Mississippi. If there's a problem in Pima County, Arizona with the Nancy Guthrie case, because there might be a cover-up or corruption, that's a possibility in her case, and now we're changing that setting to Mississippi, I'm telling you, everything is on the table. It looks like the kid might have drowned, but it's a little suspicious how the friends left on the boat and they still had his keys and his cell phone. So if he decided to stay on the island and hop a ride with somebody else, which his family and his friends say he would never have done, it's suspicious that this boat came back without him. And the boat had some kind of mechanical issue. They had to call for help because the boat was taking on water. They were sinking. You're not going to last long out there with the tides and with the sharks, let me tell you. It's like being in the middle of the ocean. It's not that safe, Now, I'm sure a boater, someone who, is a boat captain, would laugh at me and go, "Oh, I've been out there 100 times. It's perfectly safe." But it's really not. I don't mind being on a boat in a little lake. I don't mind creeks or rivers or lakes, but I'm not a middle of the ocean kind of gal. And either was my mother. I mean, she was like, she would almost get into tears and say, "If you guys want to go on a cruise, you go ahead, but I'm staying home," and my dad would say, "Okay, we're not going." And all of our friends would be like, "You should go on the cruise with us to the Caribbean," and like, we could never do it because my mom would have never got on the ship. And now as an adult, I wouldn't do it. I would have done it as a child, but I wouldn't do it now. So let me just get into the story. Let's see. Kelsa says, "Yeah, something isn't adding up. One of those boys will start talking. You just wait." Also, his water skis were on the speedboat. Oh, I didn't know about that. You know what they say, three can keep a secret if two of them are dead. Well, let me just go over this because I started studying up on this a couple days before the Juice did his story on this. People in his audience were talking about it, and they mentioned Horn Island. He was like, Horn Island, where's that? And as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh my God, Horn Island, Mississippi. Like, oh my God. And then I started like looking into the case. And then a day or two later, he did his story. But because he has so many trolls lately that for some reason have decided they don't like me calling him anymore, even though him and I get along just great, um, I decided I wasn't going to do this story yesterday because then people would come over to my channel and start trolling me going, oh, you're just doing it because somebody else did it, which isn't the case. He told me I should report on this. When I heard it was Horn Island, and then I heard the town of Ocean Springs, Mississippi, I was like, oh my God. Like, we used to know families that lived there, that all worked at that shipyard that's in Pascagoula. So let's just go over what happened, and then you guys can tell me whatever you want to tell me. Oh, I heard that, Nanette, that they suspect that a portion of his cell phone may have been wiped clean. So here it is. Nolan Wells' body was found after a July 4th boat trip. His death has fueled speculation, grief, and racial tension. Yeah, you think? Ingalls. Exactly, Candy. That's where my dad worked. And most of the friends I grew up with in Connecticut and California all worked at Ingalls. That's why we were there. So on July 4th, Nolan Wells set out to celebrate Independence Day on a popular barrier island off of Mississippi's Gulf Coast. In photos from the boat that day, the 18-year-old towers above his friends, his arm casually slung around their shoulders as he smiles for the camera. And they do look close in the picture. But he also stands out for another reason. Wells appears to be the only black man amongst the group. And I've also heard that his mother is actually half Filipino. So his father that he has now is a stepdad, but his mother's half Filipino, so that makes him a quarter Asian. And I had a Chinese friend in the private school. Let me just tell you, that can be an issue. I don't know if it's still in 2026 an issue, but we had Chinese friends in Mobile. The Chins and the Hoes, and we took some smack for that as well. Because how could we have two Chinese families and a black family as friends? But we were also friends with Southern families. My nanny that raised me was from a good Southern family. It says, later that afternoon, when his friends returned to the dock, Wells was not with them, and nobody knows why. Hours later, his family reported him missing. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department launched the Let's start again. The Jackson County Sheriff's Department launched a search that would soon end tragically when Wells's body was recovered on the island Monday. That was 2 days later. Apparently, he had floated up to the island. But he was deceased. Now investigators are appealing to the witnesses on the island on July 4th for any information about the moments leading up to his death. But on social media, online speculation has placed Wells's death at the center of a fierce debate over race relations in the United States. Now keep in mind that there is no, I don't think there's any cell signal out there, but kids have their phones and they take pictures. There were lots of kids out there for July 4th, and, they were taking pictures and video, I'm sure. Now it says, here's what we know. A rising star sets out to mark July 4th. Yeah, this guy was a rising football star. Wells graduated from Ocean Springs High School in the coastal Mississippi town of Ocean Springs, just east of Biloxi. Been there, but don't remember it well. That was more than 40 years ago. Candy says no cell service. Thank you, Candy. I'm so glad to have somebody from Pascagoula in here. That's so cool. Nolan was so much more than an outstanding football player, his high school coach Jake Bramlett said in a statement shared with CNN affiliate WXXV. He carried himself with humility, treated others with respect, worked hard, and led by example. After graduating, Wells enrolled in Southwest Mississippi Community College, where he was a wide receiver on their football team. Yeah, he was just getting ready to start. That's why he had to come back from that island trip, because they were starting practice like that week. Like July 4th was on a weekend, And that next week, even though the semester hadn't started yet, the football players already had to report to duty. Hey, I got 30 people in here and only 13 thumbs up. Can I get a thumbs up? It says, like countless Americans across this country, Wells set out to mark the July 4th holiday on the water. Wells was supposed to return to school Monday to start training for the upcoming football season. His father, Elmore Wansley, said in the family's first interview Friday with Good Morning America, it was his last weekend to have fun. So Wells joined his friends from high school for a boat trip to Horn Island, a federally protected barrier island that's known for its pristine sands and wildlife about 10 miles off the Mississippi coast. And let me tell you, even though I never made it on that boat to that island, I remember being maybe a mile or two out, and you can't see, you just see the waves. You don't see like the land. It's not like Catalina that's 21 miles out from Long Beach and there's like mountains that you can see. It's just ocean. It's a popular destination for beachgoers, and it wasn't uncommon for Wells to visit the island with friends, his family said. Is it cold with the water you're standing in? I'm not going to answer you anymore, JLE. A mother's plea launches a desperate search. Wells's family then reported him missing the night of July 4th after they received a phone call around 11 p.m. from one of his friends. I would assume that meant one of the friends on the boat? I'm not sure. In the early hours of July 5th, his mother, Christine Wansley, began posting desperate appeals for any information about her son's location on social media. Nolan is still missing. She wrote in a Facebook post, "Please, if you're a praying person, please pray he is found alive, safe, and unharmed." In another post later that morning, Wansley said she and her husband had possession of their son's cell phone and that they had traveled to the island to search for him. Yeah, apparently they went out on a boat with his high school football coach. Later that night, Wansley posted photos of Nolan she said were taking during the July 4th boat trip. Wells, at 6'1", smiles for the camera in his blue swim trunks and sunglasses. Yeah, but he came back. Okay, well, the boat came back with the three boys, and apparently because they had these mechanical issues, they were towed for at least 3 miles of the 10-mile trip back. Then they went back to the harbor they left from, but then they went to another harbor, another dock, then came back. They kind of went back and forth, and eventually the boat somehow magically made it to Biloxi. I don't know what all that was about. And then a friend, I don't know which friend, called the parents at 11 p.m. that same night, like, have you seen them? But yet I don't know exactly what their stories were, meaning the three boys that made it back, what they told the parents or what they told the police, because he just wasn't on the boat. Like, were they trying to say, well, he stayed behind or we couldn't find him? You know, it's a little sus. And there's kids that were recording with their cell phones because, you know, it's Horn Island. It's a big party. It's kind of like Panama City Beach, which I love, by the way, but it was known as the Redneck Riviera. And if you live in that part of Florida, you don't want to be there for spring break because it just goes berserk. And I'm sure, like, there's a lot of kids that are going out to Horn Island, but there's kids with cell phones, and they're all taking selfies and videos and pictures. Even though there's no cell signal, you can still record with your camera. And there was a couple recordings that picked up an argument, and you could hear a boy, apparently I haven't heard it, but there's a boy that says, like, give me my cell phone, just give me my phone. No, the boys are not in police custody. And, oh, the judge? Oh, it's her stepson, who's one of the boys. Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Candy. Yeah, it is what it is. Something happened. They have done an autopsy in Jackson County, Mississippi. Well, it could be, is the coroner there with the county or with the state? Here in LA, it's the county, but like Alaska, it's the state. So whoever the coroner is that handles that county, they did do an autopsy, and then the parents sent the body to Washington, D.C. for a private autopsy because people in Washington, D.C. would not be associated with any law enforcement judges or politicians in southern Mississippi, you know, just in case. Seems to me like a white family wouldn't have to do that, have an independent autopsy, but a black family in Mississippi does need to have an independent autopsy. And don't come down on me and saying that I'm saying everybody in Mississippi is racist, because I'm not saying that. I mean, some of our best friends we met in Mississippi and Alabama, and some stayed. Most didn't. Most got the heck out of Dodge and moved on. My dad made some stupid, ridiculous comment when we were in Maryland about how it was like to not be behind the Dixie curtain anymore or something. And I just looked at him like, Dad, like, it was just like when he thought that the black family coming from Connecticut would be safe. And then they almost died, you know? Like, hello? But see, he was at work all the time. And a lot of times he traveled all over the world, all over the country. He was usually in Washington, D.C. or California, or one time he went to China while he was down there, and Australia, like, you know. And then when he was home, we were like, we'd get out of there and go on vacation, or we'd be spending the weekends in Florida or the 3-day holidays in Florida. So, you know, he basically just slept and had dinner in Mobile. In Mississippi, he was either sitting in an office or climbing up on the ship or being out in the Gulf of Mexico on sea trial. So he didn't see things from the same perspective that I saw, you know, having to go into the school system there. The speedboat was taking on water and called 911. The bilge pump was not working properly. Heard the 911 call. Yeah, I need to hear that. I heard about the bilge pump. I'm not even sure what that is because I'm not a boat person. I'm sure my dad, who built ships for a living, would laugh, but I have no idea what the bilge pump is. But how did this guy not be on the boat? But others say that he was on the boat. But when the boat made it back to Ocean Springs or wherever they left from, he wasn't on it. And then when the parents, they had to use some type of tracking through Snapchat to find out where his phone was. And then they went to a house that was full of people, and I don't know if they weren't welcomed inside or they had to wait, but there were all these different stories where the phone was, and then it took 15 minutes for someone to hand them the actual cell phone. Kathy, thank you for the gold coin. I heard the boys were drinking. Well, I would assume so, because when I was a kid, a teenager, in that part of the country, everybody drank as kids. And a lot of the kids, I never did this thing, but a lot of the girls that I knew would get with their boyfriends and they would drive to Mississippi over the border on Friday night, because there were places in Mississippi that would sell beer to underage kids, you know. And you know, their boyfriends would be drinking as they were driving back to Alabama. I never went that far. But yeah, you know, there wasn't a whole lot to do in that part of the country. You know, they had some good concerts down there, especially in Mississippi. Like, they got Van Halen and Mobile got Blondie. And my Blondie concert got canceled because Van Halen, who I wasn't really familiar with at that time, until that happened, they sold out. So the kids would, you know, drive, you know, into central Mississippi to go to, they had better concerts than Mobile. And I know a lot of friends who, with their boyfriends, would drive to Mississippi every Friday night to get their illegal beer. Where are the parents? I don't think it's a parent kind of thing to go out to Horn Island. You know, like you know how to grow the wacky tobacco. I'm a detective, for Christ's sakes. Goodbye. Has law enforcement questioned the girl he met and walked off with her? I don't know about a girl that he met. See, that's just it. Did he choose to stay on the island? Did he choose to ride home with somebody else and he never made it? And something happened on the island, like, you know, you got teenage kids and you got a holiday and you got heat and humidity and fun in the sun, and, you know, you got beer and probably other substances. Things can go wrong, especially with kids of that age. I look back on my youth and I go, oh my God, how did I ever survive? Now, luckily for me, I started my PI career really young. And so I realized, like, oh, I can't be involved in any bad stuff. I gotta grow up quick because, I have an important job and I gotta pay rent. So, I didn't have 4 years of college. I have some college, but not 4 years. Let's see. Kathy said she heard the boys were drinking. Probably, but I don't know. And what does this mean? Life 360 family location app? What does that mean? I don't know anything about the girl, but that's interesting. Where were the parents? They were at home. He had already spent the night on the night of the 3rd at a friend's house and then left with either those friends or some other friends to go on the boat trip. There was a parent on the boat. I'm hearing that it was just the 3 boys and him, but I wasn't there. Colleen, hi April, hope you're doing well. Thank you, Colleen. So, I don't know a lot of details about this. I know more than I did a couple of days ago, but I don't know this case like I know Nancy Guthrie or John Benet Ramsey or MH370. Life 360 is how the mom located his phone. Okay, I heard today that it was through Snapchat, but yet his Snapchat, that's the app that they looked into that and it was deleted or cleaned, so they say, or they assume. But there was no cell signal on the island. But if they weren't swimming, most of the kids probably would have carried their phones like in their pockets. Nanette says it's like a pump sump. You mean a sump pump that pulls water out of a boat? You mean a bilge? Is that what that is? Oh, okay. Candy says, no, there was a person who owned the boat with the boys. I heard that somebody in Biloxi owned the boat, but then I also heard that when they came back to dock, where they had originally left from, the boat left and went to another location, and then left, came back to the original dock again, and then somehow made it back to Biloxi. I don't know, like, the timeline of any of this. I did not know there was a parent on the boat. I've been hearing that he was on the boat with 3 boys, that it was just, the 18-year-old boys. Now, I don't know how old the other boys were, but I would assume they were around, high school or college age like him. Yes, they pulled the boat from the dock. But not just like when they went back, it didn't just get pulled out of the water. It went to some other facility. I'm not sure about all of this. But what I am sure about is that these 4 boys went out together to Horn Island on July 4th. And by later that afternoon, when the boat came back, there was only 3 boys. And the boy that was missing was the black child. But the parents, they didn't know until 11 o'clock when a friend, and they're not saying, was it one of the friends on the boat or was it just some other friend saying, hey, where is he? And then they got suspicious. But there's no way to reach him if he was still on the island because there's no cell signal out there. But by the next morning, they were out there calling the Coast Guard, and the football coach took them out on a boat to look for him, but they didn't find him. And then the next day, on Monday the 6th, I guess sometime that morning, they found him, washed up to the island. We should find out the name of the original captain. Yeah, I'd like to know. So there's a lot of details, like I said, that are not very clear about this. What's really important is, did he get on that boat to leave with the boys? Now, he has a very close friend, like a best friend, that's not one of the boys that was on the boat, who said the same thing his parents said, that if he went with that group, he would have come home with that group. Kelsa says, it'll be interesting what the second autopsy shows. Exactly. Allegedly, his friends are saying he'd been flirting with a girl he had just met and wanted to stay behind to get to know her better. See, that thought crossed my mind before I even heard that. That, he is an 18-year-old boy, and, there may have been drinking, and, kids will be kids, and, maybe he met a girl. That's crossed my mind, and he decided to stay behind. But what's weird is that I'm not hearing, like in the press, what the three boys are saying happened. And now his parents have hired this civil rights attorney, and he can't interview those boys because guess what? All three of them have lawyered up. Why? Why would you need a lawyer? Like, what's going on? They have all lawyered up. And so the parents' civil rights lawyer, who I believe is from Atlanta, his name is Crump, and he was involved with the Floyd case. See, I didn't know about a girl that changes things. We don't know what's true and what's not true. But they're interviewing a lot of the other kids that were on the island. And I'd like to know, just because I'm curious, like how many of those kids were white and how many of those kids were black. And I'm not like a black person that's pointing fingers. I'm just saying I am a person that's lived all over the country, from Connecticut to Northern California to Southern California to Mobile, Alabama to Maryland, which sits right on the border of Virginia. And both Virginia and Maryland are still below the Mason-Dixon line, but yet I spent 5 years off and on of my teenage years, hanging with my California best friends that were living now in New Jersey near Philadelphia. And then at 18, I moved back to California. And basically been here ever since, other than a couple of trips when I was younger. Yeah, you're right, April. Why lawyer up if you're innocent? Yeah, his lawyer, the family's, and he's not a criminal lawyer. He's a civil rights attorney. He cannot speak to the boys. Nobody can interview these boys about, why wasn't he on the boat? And they've all got lawyers. And like I said, I heard that one of them had a mother who's a judge, and somebody here in the comments said that it's actually a stepmother. The judge's son called Nolan's mother. So is that one of the boys then that was on the boat? But they were asking where was he? Huh? Because I thought it was one of the boys that was on the boat that called the mom or called the parents. There's just too much conflicting information. But the kid gets on the boat with the three boys, and the three boys come back, and the kid doesn't, and nobody knows what's happened to him. But yet they have his wallet and his phone, or his keys, but definitely his phone, which the parents then, through Snapchat, located where the phone was that evening and went over and got it. But they didn't hand it over right away. There seemed to be confusion about that. If he decided to stay behind and okay, you guys just go because I just met this girl, I'm going to stay here. He wouldn't have let those boys drive off with his phone and his keys, because he had driven his car to the friend's house. So he needs his car keys. He needs his phone. And apparently he didn't have his wallet either. That was all left behind. Why would you have the boat leave with your wallet, your keys, and your cell phone? Something's off. If he would have stayed back with a girl, he would have kept his stuff. Of course. Which teenager would just say, here, you can drive off 10 miles across the ocean with my phone and my car keys and my wallet? It makes no sense. And his parents taught him, if you go off in a group, you stay with that group. And his best friend, who wasn't on this boat, was like, oh, he would have never left the group. Now, like I said, I I remember those party days and kids buying beer and kids drinking, and, you know, he could have made a bad decision about something and just, poor judgment just because, he's a kid. Um, the girl left before he did, okay? Um, of course, Kelsers, I'm going with my gut. Those boys know something. Exactly. And I'm not saying that they, like, unalived this boy. I'm not saying that at all. But something happened, and all of a sudden, they're not talking. One of them has a mother or a stepmother who's a judge in Mississippi. And I would assume, if it's anything like it was when we lived there, well, we lived in Alabama, but my dad worked in Mississippi, so we spent a lot of time there in the 70s. I would assume that, the politicians, the sheriff, the judges, most of them are white. Now, our friends, our black friends that moved across the street from us in Mobile, the mom was actually a lawyer and a judge, and she had a scholarship to Howard University. And she was from some poor little town called Sunflower, Alabama, and lived in a shack or something. And, made it to law school because she was very intelligent. And, after so many years of being a lawyer, ended up becoming a judge, but she still ran a legal clinic at night in downtown Mobile that catered to the black community for people that had no money or very little money because they needed a lawyer, but they couldn't afford a lawyer. So she basically had a free legal clinic where she helped, the poor, even though she had worked full time all day as a judge, and she had 2 kids at home. I remember a lot of times, and she came from a big family, that mother, and she would have some of her nieces over at her house, especially when her husband died, because now there was no husband. He got cancer and died shortly after they bought that house. So she would have her nieces to come over and help babysit. Because I remember going over to that house to pick up my sister or whatever, or drop her off or pick her up. Because, sometimes she'd spend the night over there, or those kids. There was a little sister too, and they'd come over to our house, and, the oldest one would spend the night, or the little kids would swim in our pool. And I remember there was always like a house full of people. Like she always had like her family. Like there was always people staying there. And the mom was hardly ever home between being a judge and having her free or lower income legal clinic. So, I do have some experience of, being from a white family, living in the deep South and dealing with the segregation issues, the racial issues, the KKK issues, the cross burnings. I remember going to the airport sometimes on the weekend to drop somebody off or pick somebody up with my dad. And while we were at the red light, there was a main thoroughfare in Mobile called Airport Boulevard. And we would be on a back road from our house coming up to Airport Boulevard. And it was like for Mobile, it was a pretty big intersection. I mean, not big like LA big, but big for Mobile. And while we would be stuck at that intersection on the weekends, if we were going towards that airport, the KKK would be out on the streets with their hoods on, and they would have buckets. And they would, go up to the cars of white people, and you're supposed to roll down your window and give a donation. And my dad would yell at everybody, lock your doors, lock your doors. And there was no electric door locks back then. It was manual. And we were little kids in the back seat. And I remember, I'd be behind my dad. My sister would be beside me, behind my mom, and he'd be yelling at everybody, lock the doors, lock the doors. And they would be looking at him like, we're going to get you, but you can't see, you could just see the eyes, but you can't see the face, and they would pound on the window, like almost break the window because, he's a white man. He's supposed to roll down that door and reach into his wallet. And my dad would just wait for the light to change and drive off. But I knew, like, well, they're looking at us. They see our faces. They see our car. And Mobile is a pretty small town, like probably a lot smaller than Tucson, which seems to be Mayberry to me. So, like, everybody kind of knows everybody. And it was always scary not knowing who might be under the mask. It was scary bringing strangers into our house. Like, well, who are their parents? And how well do we know these people? And, Are they part of the Klan? And, you know, I never dealt with that in California or Maryland or New Jersey. I'm too young to remember Connecticut, but, you know, that's just, it still bothers me today. You know, I do have good memories, though, of the beaches and the boating and the swimming and, you know, my nanny, who was a very, you know, Southern woman, and she would cook fried chicken and biscuits for us, you know, and her daughter, who I grew up with, you know, like, her daughter was like another mom to me, even to this day. Like, I'm still on a Facebook group of a high school that was there. It's since been abandoned, but, you know, I still have a lot of ties. My godbrother still lives on Orange Beach. You know, I still have a lot of ties down there. But have I ever visited there since I left? Absolutely not. Let's see. Okay, she is a Jackson County Chancery judge. What is a Chancery judge? Explain, please. And the stepmom of one of the boys. Lori says, Judge mom posted, grew up friends with Nolan's mom. She's heartbroken also. Yeah, Nolan's mom, I saw an interview, and she said that she was half Filipino, but that they moved to the area when she was just a little girl. Nanette says, no, Nolan would never been, or never would have been, without his wallet, phone, and keys. Makes no sense at all. His parents said, you never stay behind without your buddies. Exactly. Nanette says, oh, really, Lori? They were lifelong friends. I don't know. You know, I don't know this case, like I said, like Nancy Guthrie and John Benet Ramsey and MH370 and, you know, I don't follow this like, you know, the Duggars or the Goslings. This is somebody until, you know, July 6th, I've never heard this name before, Nolan Wells. And I don't even know if I knew it then. I knew people were coming into my chat saying, hey, I want you to cover the Nolan Wells case. And I was like, who? Who's that? You know, hey, Roger Forever 777. Where's your better half, Roger? I haven't seen Jay in the chat. Does anyone know when the second autopsy will be finished? I don't know. It might already be finished. An autopsy doesn't take very long. But they had to get the body back and get the proper permits to transfer the body, probably by air, I would guess, to Mississippi. Or, I mean, to Washington, D.C. Hello. Like, they don't even have an airport in Pascagoula. What's the closest airport? For the person that's in Pascagoula, is it still Mobile? Is that the closest airport? And now they have Brooklyn Field open as well, which was not open as a child, but that's where I took my first driver's license test, was on Brooklyn Field. Not criminal, child divorce things like that civil suit. Are you saying she's a civil judge? Toxicology takes weeks. You know what, Lori, in LA, it takes 6 months. I'm hoping it won't take that long in his case, but apparently they're not going to announce the first autopsy report until they get the second. And I can't wait to see both of those. And if I could, you know, hopefully copies will go online, because autopsy reports are very expensive to order. So I don't think I would order them, but if they become available online. Roger Forever. Is that the pointing heart? It's taking up the whole screen. Oh, the finger heart. Thank you. Gulfport, Mobile, and a lot in Jackson County. Okay, but, you know, like commercial airports, is Gulfport the closest one past Mobile? Because I remember in the day, some people would travel all the way to New Orleans because that was a bigger airport and the flights were cheaper. Mobile was a regional airport, and it was very expensive. When I was a kid, it was super expensive. Jay says she's here. Somebody who's a member, throw up your custom membership emojis in the chat, because you guys are my pips, my members. Um, but yeah, it could take weeks. In LA, it takes months. And, I'm used to it because of cases, but let me tell you, when I had somebody close to me die, that was the hardest thing ever, was to wait from October until February to get the results. It was excruciating. So I know what the parents are going through. I mean, I haven't lost a child, but I lost somebody who was like family to me, and to wait from October all the way to February to have and seemed like it was mid-February or late February. And we're going October, November, December, January, February. So it was like 5 months. And they said, yeah, give it at least 6 months, but it could be a little sooner. Yeah, it was a few weeks sooner. It was like, 5 months and change. Jay put the Kelsa kitty and Amelia Kinsley bunny. And Kelsa, she put them all up there. Mobile is closer to Pascagoula, but Gulfport is closer to Ocean Springs. Okay, does Gulfport have like commercial flights as well? Like the Mobile Regional Airport? I think they called it Bates Field, which I think was about 10 minutes to the west. Yes, okay. See, you know what I remember is when I was really little and I would stand outside with my neighbor waiting for the carpool, that you could hear planes sometimes from a distance, like taking off in the mornings. Like, it was probably only about, a few miles away. And there was no straight way to get there. You had to take all these little, like, turns, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And I remember if you drove a little bit past that airport on Airport Boulevard, you'd hit the swamps and the marshes that would, until you hit that, going over the border to Mississippi, and it was just marshes and swamps and alligators. I don't know how I survived my childhood. I don't know how I survived the alligators and the sharks of the Gulf of Mexico. Because I almost bit the dust once in Gulf Shores, Alabama, there was a shark weekend, let's just say. I look back on it now and I'm terrified. I don't think I'd ever get into the water again. Love to be sitting in a chair on a warm beach under a sun canopy right now. Seems like they want this to be about race. I don't think it has anything to do with race. And it may not be about race. But look at the attorney that they hired. And I bet he probably contacted them like, hey, let me represent you on this. Roger sent the high five. Thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, I don't want this to be about race if it's not about race. But if this is just an accident, why aren't the boys just saying what happened, and why have they all had to lawyer up? I have no idea what you're talking about, Hobble One. I don't see any armadillos. I've seen them in the south, but are you talking on my green screen? What are you talking about? You mean, like, because I was talking about the alligators and the sharks, like, oh, is that what you mean? Have I ever seen an armadillo? Lots of them. They're always, like, dead on the side of the road. Poor things. They're like southern roadkill. Here in LA, the roadkill is like squirrels and raccoons. Yeah, they're pretty cool, though. Armadillos. And there's different kinds, too. Oh, that's what you meant. Okay, I was like, what? Well, sorry, I didn't get that at the moment. I was just like, I'm thinking about this case. My head is spinning. But now I know what you mean. I figured it out eventually. Hobble One. But yeah, there was a lot of wildlife there. A lot of snakes, too. But I don't mind snakes. I just don't want one in my apartment because I have a rabbit. Me hate racist stuff. Me too. But you know, when I tell everybody on this channel, like, no religion, no politics, and we're inclusive to everyone, that's because that's how I grew up. We're inclusive to everybody. They were good eating? Armadillos? Oh, I don't want to know, Roger. After Monday, we will get answers. What's happening on Monday, Candy? I'm glad we have somebody in the chat here who is living in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And she was able to inform me that the words I was trying to think of was the Mississippi Sound, which is part of the Gulf of Mexico, but I just, you know, without Candy here, I would have been lost for words. Jay hates snakes. Yeah, I don't understand why the boys just don't say what happened. The longer it takes them, the more sus they are. Apparently, yeah, they've never given the parents answers as to, you got booted. We didn't boot you. Nolan going home. Oh, on Monday? Oh, are they doing like the autopsy now or this week? And he's flying home on Monday? Are they having his funeral next week? Or celebration of life? Yeah, it's probably going to be that something stupid happened and a tragedy, you know, something happened and the boys are scared and now it's all being covered up. But, you know, wonder if it's worse than that, you know. Who was from Mississippi? Candy Rose. She's in our chat. And I hope you're subscribed to me, Candy. Because I will, you know, I will keep this case relevant as well. I mean, I'm sure the whole country will. Like, this is a pretty big. But my dad, if you weren't here earlier, Roger, my dad worked in Pascagoula. So I'm really familiar with Pascagoula and Ocean Springs, and I even know where Horn Island is. Hello, Kinsley. Daniel Garcia. Hey, April, it's me, Daniel. I referred people your way from your TikTok live earlier saying you got a good channel. Thank you. Because you know what? My subscriber rate, after I hit 3K, so quickly after 2K, my subscriber rate is just really slow. In fact, I've lost one since I went on the air. How does that happen? Today it's going up, and then it's going down. And then it hit 3670 because I heard my little metric clock go ding ding. I heard the little bicycle ding ding. And then I heard the thunder. And I was like, huh? And it had gone down to 3669. Now we've lost another one. I've lost 3 today. Roger was born and raised in Louisiana. Yeah, I know. Jay was telling me that. Aren't you from like Shreveport? So you're probably familiar then with the Mississippi Sound and the Gulf of Mexico. Thank you, Kathy. They are going to release autopsy after his service on Monday. Oh, good. But which both of them or the because it does take time to get toxicology. That's not, you know, that's not instant. Although in LA, I think the reason it takes so long is just because everybody's so backed up. In San Bernardino County, it can take a year. And I hated going to that morgue. Ooh, that was awful. I didn't go there very often compared to LA. Like, I practically lived at the LA morgue during my career. But the last time I was actually there, which will probably be the last time until I'm actually a dead person there. Like, I hope not. But the last time I was there was for a personal reason, and I never want to be there again. Kelsers, thank you for the 100. Both are ready. If he drowned, we will know. Okay, but then if he drowned, we got to know how he drowned. You know. Did he accidentally, you know, was he drunk and he fell off the boat? Or, you know, did somebody, you know, get into an argument and it got physical and he fell? You know, now we go back to Natalie Wood. And, you know, there was a lot of alcohol involved in that. But, you know, that happened in the 80s. I even met one of the cops in my detective school, one of the sheriffs who was there when they pulled the body out. And, you know, we still don't know the truth with what really happened there now, do we? And what was that? I'm trying to remember what year that was. Was it 82? Roger had to move to Missouri to find me 42 years ago, though. That's a good thing he did. I heard it's going to a grand jury. I've heard that too, Kinsley. Let's just find out what happened. Yeah, his phone was on the boat. His phone, his wallet, and his keys, but he wasn't apparently. So did he get on the boat when they came back, and then he wasn't on the boat anymore when the boat came back to the mainland, or did he never get on the boat to begin with? And how did he end up dead? Thank you, Kathy, for the star. Appreciate that. I'm up to $2.43 in jewels today. Plus the $2 super chat. Let's not forget that. From Lori Smith. I just want to make sure I hearted that. I hope you guys gave Lori a thumbs up. Yes, you've watched me before. Okay. Yeah, I had a friend down there named Candy. But it was Candy with a K. Roger sent the Flo stayed. The boys say no, he stayed on Horn Island. Okay. Yeah, they looked like they were really good buddies in the photo. Nothing looked off with the picture that they took that day. Where he's in, he's wearing the swim trunks. I guess he's a very likable kid, but something happened and the kid is dead. And the boys that he was with, their parents have lawyered them up. All of them. All three of them. Somebody knows something. And now, because of the civil rights lawyer that's involved, I can't think of his first name right now. I've just drawn a blank. He's a black male too. His last name is Crump. He's from a law firm in Atlanta, but he's like a really famous civil rights attorney. The girl said Nolan said he was going back with his friends. I'm just glad Nanos isn't investigating this case. Candy Rose says something happened, somebody knows something. Absolutely. Same thing with Nancy Guthrie. There's somebody out there who knows who Front Porch Guy is. And nobody's calling in on that case to get their reward. Is there any reward on this case? That's a good question that I just had. I came up with that all on my own. Is there a financial reward that's being offered for information? Tyler Perry is paying for the funeral costs. I heard that, poor kid. And you're right, that's good. Sheriff Nanos isn't investigating this case. And there is not a reward. And don't the parents have a GoFundMe or something too? You think the FBI is taking over the case? Which case? Nolan Wells? Kinsley says yes. And Candy Rose, what was your yes to? Oh, about the GoFundMe? See, I can't even remember my own questions I just posed. I'm just saying yes, no, yes. All came in together. Like, huh, what? I was wondering if the FBI was involved. The Coast Guard should be involved too because of the location of the death. But then that island where they found the body that had floated up, from what I'm hearing, that's considered Jackson County, Mississippi. Like Catalina Island off the coast of LA, 21, 22 miles off the coast is considered LA County. But there's another island that's kind of hiding behind it. That's a military spot that I can't talk about, and that's actually technically part of Ventura County. And has like an 805 area code. In the middle of the ocean. And it's just a dot, but it's way back behind Catalina. And there's some pretty interesting stuff that goes on out there. And don't ask me how I know that. And I've had cases at that location and at Catalina, but I'm not getting on a boat and going out there. Well, the other one, you can't even take a boat. You have to take a Navy airplane from Point Magoo Naval Air Station, to get there. But Catalina, you take a ferry or you can take a boat. So I had a lady that worked for me, an older lady, and I'm like, do you want to get on a boat and go to Catalina? And she was like, oh, yeah. And then when she got there, they picked her up with another boat and took her to another part of the island, and she loved it. And I was so thankful that she did that I had a case up where, they filmed arachnophobia, and I was like, do you want to go up to, I can't think of the name of that town right now, this second, but she took a little trip to Hearst Castle and everything. I'm like, hey, you went out on 2 boats in the middle of the ocean for me, so, she's like, can I stop at Hearst Castle on the weekend? Can I stay in a hotel? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Just send me the bill. And she was so happy. The FBI is assisting the Sheriff's Department, Google announced. Okay. So I guess it's Jackson County Sheriff that has jurisdiction of that island, is what I'm assuming. Since it's considered part of Jackson County, Mississippi, but it's not actually a city. We have a good sheriff and DA. Is Pascagoula also in Jackson County? I assume yes. And do they still have, if I can remember this correct, you would know, Candy, is there a hospital there in Pascagoula called Singing River? Let me know. Yes, Jackson County, yes. Yes to Singing River Hospital? Yes. And there used to be a hotel there, but I don't think, well, it's a motel. And I just remember it was white. It's kind of like the Bates Motel. It was called the Longfellow House. That's how, I'm old as dirt. So if you're younger than me, Candy, you probably wouldn't know about that because I don't think it's there. Yes, Singing River. See, I remember that. One of our close family friends who lived with us in Connecticut. Briefly lived in LA, just at the tip end of us living in LA. I think died in that hospital. And our best friends, who were from Philly, but we knew them from Connecticut and California, their daddy a couple times was taken out of Ingalls by ambulance and went to Singing River. And we were so scared, like, oh my God, is he going to make it? But see, I remember that. I remember Singing River Hospital. Obviously, I remember the shipyard and the Navy ships. I remember the Longfellow House. It's a Hilton Hotel now. I think it was a little teeny motel. I remember the doors, they opened up into the parking lot, and it was full of bugs. And we would open up the door, and we had a plan ahead of time to run from as soon as we would, my dad would open the hotel door, and we would run he'd have the keys in his hand already to the car because I would be screaming bloody murder, like, ah! And there was bees and bugs and, oh, it's just like, we don't have that in LA. Well, in LA and in San Francisco Bay, we had the ants. That was always an issue, the ants. Longfellow House, meet the end with Katrina. That's what happened. Oh my gosh. Are you old enough, Candy, to remember Camille? And what was the town? It's to the west of Pascagoula where it made land. Because I remember the night that happened. And our San Francisco Bay Area neighbors, their daughter, who had lived with us for a while, stayed over at our house that night and slept in my bed. because when they lived with us, they were in different beds in a different part of the house. And that was the first time as a child I ever had someone spend the night. And she was like a big sister. So I just passed right out and slept through the entire hurricane. Oh my God. I wish I could say that about some of the others. 65 years old, Bay St. Louis. Okay. So the Longfellow house met its demise during Katrina. I didn't know that. Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Candy. I was very, very young when we arrived. And all the way from LA, it was a slow crawl in the back of a station wagon from Los Angeles. And we had planned to live in Mississippi, but the job originally was going to be in Tampa, St. Petersburg area of Florida. And at the last minute, they decided against finding a new location there, and they would just expand the location in Mississippi. And I think we were probably kind of depressed about that. You know, I would have known the difference at that age, but we were planning on going to Florida to find out we were going to Mississippi. And we lived in the Longfellow house while my dad went to work and had the car, and we were just stuck all day. And it was horrible. And then on the weekends, we would go out with the realtor to look for a place to live. And that's how we ended up in Yankee Land, Alpine Hills. Nanette says San Clemente Island is owned by the U.S. Navy. Yeah, that's true too. My ex had a high security clearance, and I can't say what he did when company he worked for sent him there. Yeah, it's a lot like San Nicolas. But San Nicolas is operated by Point Magoo. And I don't know if San Clemente, that's probably operated by one of the bases in San Diego, I would guess, but I'm not sure about that. Bay St. Louis is where Camille hit in 1969. Okay. Oh, wow. See, it's been a lot of years. I mean, I remember New Jersey better, even though I never lived in New Jersey, but I spent a lot of time there. I remember that better, even more than our home that we lived in, or that I lived in briefly in Silver Spring, Maryland, which was in the D.C. area. And I didn't have the best time when I lived there. I mean, I did and I didn't. We traveled a lot, and my mom always said our good friends got us through it. But at the time, it just seemed excruciatingly long. But now when I'm an adult and I'm living back in California, time just goes like that. The levee failed and the flood did most of the carnage. Hurricane in New Orleans wasn't that lethal. The deluge killed 1,000. Yeah, they used to say that when we lived there, that was going to happen, and then it didn't happen until many, many decades later, when Katrina hit. Nanette says, I remember Camille in 69. Oh, I was just a toddler, because that's the year I graduated. Okay. Yeah, New Orleans is under sea level, I believe, and is still sinking. And I hear that there are some neighborhoods down there that they've never cleaned up after Katrina, and they're still like just missing people out there. I don't know if that's true. That there's some neighborhoods that have been totally abandoned, and they've never recovered a lot of the missing. Like, I think that should all be, addressed. But I remember in Mobile, there were areas that were flattened during Camille, and they had never been rebuilt when Frederick hit 10 years later. New Orleans, the funding was given but not used for levee maintenance. I remember that was always a big subject of controversy when I was a child about, will the levees hold in New Orleans? And I have a couple really good childhood friends that were from there. And one was raised there until like the 9th grade. So I spent a lot of time going back and forth. That's what I've heard, Annette. It looks like a war zone in those areas from Katrina left abandoned. Like, why is the military not involved? Like, or the National Guard, or, you know, it's just, I mean, there could still be, you know, victims in their homes. I guess it was just all wiped off the map. You would need a boat to get there. But I would imagine that, you know, it's on dry land by now. Or is it? It is sad, Kelsers. I do remember, though, that in that area of the country, there was a lot of swampy areas, and then the trees would just like snap off in the hurricanes, and you can't go out in the swamps to, you know, cut the trees down. So you'd have all these trees where they wouldn't have any branches or any leaves. They were just like the trunks sticking up with the tops cracked off. And those would all, it'd be like a telephone pole that snapped in a tornado. And they were all in the swamps, and you would just see these trees like sticking up in the swamps with no tops. The National Guard shot people trying to flee. Oh my God. You know, why don't they pull Army Corps of Engineers or National Guard to clean everything up? You know, that's what I just said. Like, their people had boats in the yard. Okay. Wow. This case is bringing up a lot of memories. And I think we'll know more when these autopsy reports are made public. And as soon as I know, you know, I'll make an announcement here, but I'm sure all you guys are, you know, following this. We were talking about Katrina. But this video today is about Nolan Wells. So if you weren't here at the beginning, you'll have to watch it on the replay. And I doubt we're going to have the audience for this that we have for Nancy, but nothing new on Nancy today. But hashtag, you know, oh, I'm missing my Dodger Yankee game. Oh, geez. Hashtag justice for Nancy. Hashtag justice for Nolan Wells. Yeah, I wasn't supposed to go this long because my Dodger Yankee game is on, and we haven't had a game since Sunday. So I'm going to sign off. Thank you for the super chat. Lori Smith, thank you for the $3.43 in jewels from everybody who sent. Have a good evening.